Now hire the best. Contact Lee, Cosell, and Fiegley today. And now, to address the legal concerns of the community, Praise AM 1310, 95.1 FM presents Legally Speaking. Here are today's hosts.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us once again. I got my superstar panel all ready to go today. The incredible Vanita Banks, former president of the National Bar, expert in cybersecurity, just incredible credentials. We're so glad that she's back from her journey at the Bar Convention. Of course, the famous Milton Grimes, who represented Rodney King. But the most significant part about that is ushered into American evidence of police misconduct that was so blatant until it led to mass riots and things. But it's changed the culture at a certain time as to police misconduct. But Milton needs to get back on the rodeo because it's getting just as bad as it used to be. And then, of course, Marlon Prime, career Justice Department official. He spent his career making the Justice Department justice for all American equally. And so we're so glad to have them. But the first thing that I want to talk about today is that we were off the air and we were talking about the issue of school busing. And I was class president, and we had a conversation last night, and it just appeared to me that there were some folks in my class maybe had a different experience I did. When we had school buses, Milton, Vanita, and Marlon, I went to high school from all-black high school, East Lake, to Pohoka High School. And when I got to Pohoka High School, we had I had all white teachers. And the black teachers from my old school, they weren't hired. And so, and we had some significant issue in terms of race relations when I started. And the reason this is important because now we see a reversal of these laws and protections that occurred over the years. But it's time to reflect on where we came from and maybe move forward. I was talking to Milton. It was just amazing. He went to the school. What's that school you attended, Milton?
My school?
Yes.
Luther Jackson High School in Fairfax County, the only black school that existed during my time in high school in the county.
Did you do the deseg order?
Huh?
Was your high school subject to the segregation order? Did you go to the all-white school?
It was a voluntary thing when I came along, when I graduated in '63, because I remember a couple of our ball players transferred with a smile on their face, and 6 months later they were miserable. But it was part of the order, but it wasn't mandatory that we transfer.
Oh, I see. Hey, Vanita, did you go to all-black school or did you go to integrated school or desegregated school?
I went to an integrated school. I went to Shortridge High School in Indianapolis, Indiana, where I grew up. And at Shortridge, and actually, I walked to school or had the ability to walk to school. At that time, the high school population was, I'm thinking maybe, it was becoming more predominantly Black, but at that time, I think it may have been maybe 40 to 60%. And Shortridge at that time was an academic high school and required an actual exam, a test to get into the school. And so I was fortunate, and this was before the great white flight, if you will, Nathaniel. In Indianapolis, we had neighbors across the street, in my neighborhood that were white. So, but the white flight, if you will, was beginning to occur at that time. So I had diverse teachers and wonderful teachers, many of which were African American. But let's just talk about Shortridge for a minute. In the 1930s and 40s, Shortridge was one of the best high schools in the nation. In fact, one of our graduates, the great author Kurt Vonnegut,
Wow.
stated that he wished that every um, high school um, student had the opportunity to attend a public high school like Shortridge. In addition to its academic curriculum, we had the opportunity to participate in fencing, golf, ROTC. We were the only and maybe the first high school in the nation to have a daily newspaper, the Shortridge Echo. And so I had a wonderful high school experience that prepared me for life. And I'm going to try to remember what we saw every time we entered the auditorium. At the top, the auditorium reads these words: a disciplined mind and a dedicated heart are elements of power. Caleb Mills.
Incredible. And what about you, Marlon? Did you go to the segregated school or what?
Well, my parents were didn't they weren't able to get college degrees because of discrimination, and they did not have the apparatus that was put in place. It's now being eroded in terms of student loans and grants and things of that sort. So they really put an emphasis on education, sent us all to Catholic school. So I went to a Catholic elementary school. And then went to a Catholic high school called Archbishop Hogan High School. There were very few African Americans there, but my parents just encouraged us to just shoulder through it and making sure that we have the resources that unfortunately a lot of the public schools just did not have. And so it did prepare me for college and law school and beyond. I was very active in student activities and obviously sports as well. It was an overall positive experience.
That's great. In conclusion on this issue, the reason I bring it up is that once we went to the high school, we marched, we boycotted classes because of blatant discrimination at the school. And the reason that's important is that we're seeing history kind of being whitewashed now in the sense that some folks maybe have forgotten about the struggle. The Attorney Banks were talking about the IPS. Uh, the That case ended in a massive litigation here in Indianapolis, and the lawyer that did that was a lawyer named John Moss. And the IPS busing case ended in Indianapolis. You're not going to believe this. I think in 2003 or 2004. I know that because I represented John Moss on the fee petition at the end of the case. It was just incredible. So the case went on for, I don't know, a quarter of a century or so in terms of busing, but in Indianapolis, it was like one-way busing and not two-way because the federal judge, Judge Dillon, he had to carry a gun with him. And so the two-way busing never would have worked here in Indianapolis and people would have lived. Okay,
You're
Imhotep, you got a
absolutely right,
question?
Attorney Lee, regarding that 1973 court order, which ordered federal judge Hugh Dillon ordered the one-way busing of Black students from the Indianapolis public school system, IPS, to surrounding suburban township school districts within Marion County to achieve desegregation. And that one-way arrangement led to the enrollment decreases, as you know, in the public school system and subsequently inner city school closures. That order was phased out, as I believe you mentioned. It was intended to be phased out um, in Well, it was officially concluded in 2016.
Okay.
Oh, Brother Nate?
Oh, yeah, Imhotep, what do you got for
All
me?
right. Good morning to all my fabulous guests. Milton, you graduated 1963. Man, I wasn't born till 65. What? Man, thank
Now I
you.
know what the problem
You're
is.
elder. Thank you. Okay. Appreciate you, attorney. Thanks. All you are wonderful. I just had a call about yesterday's developments. I know you guys. I know you ain't got to. I know you probably was. I got to throw my 2 cents in about David Hearn and Midas Touch and all the Aaron Partners, all of the our great media on social media. We got new media now. Have really been covering all the montage of Janine Pirro and Fox News. Yeah, he did it. He damaged the pool. This is preposterous, Nate. This is abuse of power. I don't know how much David Hearn had to spend to even hire an attorney in D.C. I'm sure Attorney Pryans may know what goes on in the circuit court. Federal court up there, what the cost may be to even get an attorney to take a case. Because I mean, he was charged with a felony, but just dipping his hand in. But to sit there in the federal papers, I just looked at the papers. First of all, they said that when they filed the case, that the Department of Interior had not given them all the information yet about the condition of the reflecting pool. They did not have video evidence. They had no witnesses corresponding, anything like that. So they just remember the park police just saw him dip his hands and he just washed his hands, basically. And then they arrested him. But then when they filed for the dismissal yesterday, they subsequently said the Department of Interior had provided them now with the information that said that the reflecting pool condition and the peeling of the paint and all of the damages was done because of shoddy contract work. How does this happen, Nate? How do we have this? And I'm hoping David Hearn, which it'll come out of taxpayers, which we are the taxpayers. But I'm hoping he sues Fox News. I'm hoping he sues the federal government. I'm hoping he sues everybody involved. This is a miscarriage. This is malicious prosecution. We have a Justice Department run amok. Janine Pirro needs to be disbarred, or she needs to at least be brought up on some type of judicial complaint about what goes on. I just want you all take on it. I know you may have been getting into it, but this is bigger than what I think people really understand.
Well, Imhotep, wait a second.
This is happening. Go ahead.
Imhotep, I did follow part of that case, and here's what was most disturbing to me. The defense said, show us the evidence that you have, which you're entitled to. So they were claiming this massive destruction, and even the president chimed in, and the people, the press secretary, and it was a hit job. And when they went to show the evidence, they couldn't find any evidence. So when they filed charges without evidence, which is shocking to me. But maybe Marlon and Milton could talk about this, but I thought it was a pretty egregious mischaracterization of justice. You know, they said that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich for killing a pig. Well, you know, this is that same level of prosecution that going amok in my mind. I don't know how Milton and Marlon, maybe they could chime in and tell me about it. I don't know how it could happen, such an egregious characteristic of justice.
Well, Nathaniel, your listeners should know that in terms of the grand jury process, it's different than the trial process. The grand jury is in secret, and the only people in the room are the prosecution. And so that's why that old adage that a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. You can use evidence that normally would not be admissible in court. And so that's why all the advantages are to the prosecution. The problem in this case, in my view, are a couple things. Number one, the way the process was intended is that these investigating agencies are supposed to, get, information from the public or their own investigation. They're supposed to thoroughly vet that. And then you bring that to the U.S. attorney and they make the determination as to whether or not a case should go forward. Now, this process is kind of run amok because, instead of this traditional separation from the president and Department of Justice. You have the president actually chiming in and, indicating that. There's been vandalism, and it appears the Department of Justice was reacting to that. What's equally troubling, if you look at the release and press conference of U.S. Attorney Pirro, who was a Fox News commentator and became the U.S. Attorney in the District of Columbia, where the charges were brought, she initially said that there were witnesses, federal employees that saw this defendant engaged in activity, and so this subsequent turnabout by that office saying, "Oh no, by the way, it's based on just shoddy workmanship." Those two don't connect. So, you have affidavits, you have information from employees that actually said they eyewitnessed something. And now you have, the Department of Interior that runs a lot of the maintenance in our country saying that, hey, it was shoddy workmanship. That should have been vetted. That should have been carefully reviewed prior to the cases being presented to the case being presented to the grand jury. And when you have a rush process, when you add politics to it, you're going to get a disastrous result. And finally, I'll add is that this is something that's not only damaging to this individual, Mr. Herms, who had been indicted, had to go through this public airing of charges, but there is no local prosecutor in the District of Columbia. The federal prosecutor does federal crimes and local crimes. And so there are people that, are victims of crime. And the question is going to be, what is the credibility of the prosecutors are going to be bringing real charges against people that are, adversely impacted by crime? So I agree, that the caller should seek all relief that is available. There's statutes indicating that attorney's fees can be sought. There can be bar referrals, and there have been bar referrals. But I think we also need to look at the damage to the citizens of the District of Columbia, and also those that rely upon the Department of Justice and the Department of Justice credibility around the country.
That's the problem we have, Marlon. We can't rely upon the Department of Justice credibility and objectivity because they are being directed, controlled, and guided by a person with self-motivating agenda to make fortune while he's in that office. So you should never bring a prosecution. I don't think that's the purpose of the prosecutor's office, to look at the evidence, analyze it objectively, and decide whether or not there's enough evidence to get a conviction of a criminal charge. It seemed to be bypassing that litmus test today. So this is what we get. They are complying with the headman's desires as opposed to trying to do the right or wrong and not do the wrong thing in administering the law. I mean, that's the problem.
This was a malicious prosecution, full stop, against this former patriot and Olympian. And it was brilliant of Hearn's attorney to obtain the grand jury transcripts. And based on the transcripts, attorneys, I don't even see the ham sandwich, right? In this case, the National Park Service official testified that the pool had already been damaged. It was leaking more than 1 million gallons of water per week, and that the expansion joints in the pool had exceeded their service life, and that the liner already had a rip. And so to indict Mr. Hearns on criminal charges that carried a maximum prison sentence of 10 years on conviction for purportedly causing damage to this reflecting pool, from my perspective, was unethical. And I agree with the callers and Attorney Primes that Mr. Hearn should consider all of the legal options that are available to him at this time. From what I've seen, he is requesting, at least right now, just a simple apology.
No, this ain't the first time this is. I recently finished reading American Prometheus about Robert Oppenheimer. I referred it to Vanita. And this man made the atom bomb. And it wasn't a love desire that he made. He was ambivalent about making it, but he made it, and he saw the politics that were involved in the use of it. It wasn't necessary to be used. The U.S. had already won the war against Germany and Japan, but it was used for political reasons. But in 1954, 9 years later, when they went after him still to prove that he was a communist and a member of the Communist Party, and the things that they did to him in a hearing for his secret clearance, just to get his clearance taken away. They humiliated him. They put him up to public ridicule. J. Edgar Hoover and them had over 3,000 pages they would not let the defense see, where they had illegally wiretapped him, where they had statements from people that could have been helpful to his defense. They didn't let his defense see the documents. It was the most kangaroo court setting you've ever want to see, Marlon. You follow me? In that hearing. And they pretty much executed him. They blackmailed some of the judges that were sitting on the panel. It's the most terrible, not the most terrible. It's one of the most terrible things I've ever seen done to a human being who did what he did for this country. But it was a few people who didn't like him, didn't like his prestige, and went after him. And it was a personal attack. They wanted them out of the public spotlight, didn't get the Nobel Prize. Kennedy had to give him some other secondary prize for his contribution to our society. This ain't the first time we've let personal feelings or personal desires in our system control.
And one thing, one thing that's concerning to me is that I don't do criminal cases, audience, but I refer people to lawyers all the time on criminal cases. In a criminal case, federal criminal cases, all the lawyers that I refer to, their fee range for this type of case would start about $25,000 up to $100,000 to defend this case as a retainer fee. And these lawyers are charging between $1,000 to $2,500 an hour. And so it's a very expensive type of litigation. Now, even if you sue on the civil side of this case, and I would encourage this guy to sue a bunch of folks, but it's going to be a very expensive type of litigation. I mean, with the cost of depositions and things like that. In this case, you'd probably take about 50 because you had a lot of people, it seemed like to me, was making statements that were fundamentally wrong. And because of that, when you try to hold people accountable, and I don't believe in this idea of apology. Our justice system requires accountability. So apology doesn't pay no bills. It won't restore the money that he's lost or the stress he's undergone. And so I think that ultimately, I agree with the caller that this needs to be litigated and exposed. We remember Fox News paid out a substantial sum of money for false reporting during the electoral process about the voting company. I can't think of their name now, but every now and then, people are held accountable. In this case here, hopefully all the people that did wrongdoing will ultimately be held accountable. And that's my take on it.
The problem is, Nathaniel, the high profile case gets the attention. It gets the lawyers. It gets the money necessary to litigate. The caller said, file a lawsuit, file a lawsuit. That does not protect the poor working man. That's the victim of this abuse of this justice system that's going on. Those are the people that affect me. You follow me? Not the high profile people that's going to get a lawyer. But most people cannot afford a lawyer. And so they get run through the system. You plead to 5 years as opposed to looking at 25. And that's the abuse of this type of thing. That's why it's so important to have your check and balances. And that's why it's important for the Justice Department to do what they to do what they're sworn to do. You know,
Yeah.
they have a duty to protect society. That's part of their duty, not to just prosecute and get convictions. And when you don't do that, you hurt the little people, you hurt the majority of people. And that's
Yeah.
what is not being said.
Yeah, I agree that the prosecution, the Department of Justice, they have a lot of power, and when they run afoul of the rules, they should be punished. And in fact, there are statutes that basically indicate that if the department acts in bad faith, there can be damages and there can be attorney's fees awarded. And so, I would recommend that those that have been treated improperly go ahead and seek that recourse. And the case that Nathaniel was talking about was in the Dominion voting machines, and there was a very large settlement by Fox that Fox News had to pay because of defamation and just relaying, information that was inaccurate. The other thing that we're seeing around the country is we're seeing federal district courts really lashing out the Department of Justice. We've seen the Abreu litigation. Indicating that this was vindictive prosecution, which is a very hard standard to meet, and dismiss that case. And that was the young man that was shipped to a notorious prison in El Salvador. And, we're seeing that in other cases as well. In fact, former FBI agent Comey is also bringing that sort of claim and filed a motion to dismiss. So by all means, what's happening now at the department is certainly very, troubling. But I think on the good side, we do have a lot of federal district court judges that are standing up, and we do have a number of these prominent cases whereby the attorneys are being very aggressive in filing motions to dismiss. And I agree that, there are a lot of cases out there where a person may not have the attorney. But these high profile smackdowns that we're seeing by these federal judges, hopefully that will be a deterrent effect for other prosecutors that may act similarly.
Significant. Well, the second issue that made the big news, and I saw that Pierre brought it up about Dr. Fauci taking the Fifth Amendment. In 2000 to 2020 to 2022, we were faced with the worst pandemic of our lifetime. And we had over 1 million people died. And the government initially was slow to react to this pandemic. At the time Trump was in office, they thought that the disease process would have ended within a few months. And there were so many deaths, and we had no cure initially for this terrible disease process. People were dying, people were suffering. And the secondary effect of the pandemic was a lot worse than what people recognized, because all the regular issues like people having heart attacks or having adverse medical condition, those weren't treated. The hospital was locked down. You couldn't get in because the disease process, it was just calamity in America. And the person that we relied on, Center for Disease Control, was at the helm. And I felt that he was making accurate calls because of the decisions that were made. There was a dramatic decline, Milton, in California, of death, New York. And ultimately, the vaccine came along, and wow, we seen a remarkable recovery once we started getting vaccinated. Now, for whatever reason, it's become a revision of history. I watched part of the Senate this week and discussed when they were trying to say that Dr. Fauci apparently is a criminal. And this criminal saved millions of lives. I'm thinking, are you freaking kidding me? You guys may not remember this, but there was a Black guy running for president, lived in Georgia, and he had this famous debate, 999. What was that guy's name?
Herman Cain.
Herman Cain. How did he die? He went to a
COVID.
campaign event, he got COVID and
COVID-19.
died because they
Purdue
were
University
denying.
graduate.
He was what? I'm sorry.
He was a Purdue University graduate.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that raises an important point. You're right, Nathaniel. This is a lot of histrionics. This was a worldwide pandemic where 1 million people in the United States died, not only Herman Cain, but other prominent officials. And what's so egregious about what was done is that there was so much misinformation out there. And, you know, as many of your listeners may recall, Herman Cain and others, they refused to wear a mask. And this is not very far, long after he was diagnosed and died of complications. So, I get it that, people are angry because, businesses had to be shut down. But this pandemic would have been tremendously worse had those corrective actions not been taken. And I think it was particularly important in terms of Dr. Fauci because there was misinformation about, the president saying, hey, bleach would, kill these, COVID, and just saying a lot of things that were just factually and medically not proper. So to engage in this campaign against somebody who's been a public servant for over 50 years, and the other thing that wasn't really set forth in the hearing, Dr. Fauci did not order any businesses closed. He provided advice, and it was governors and institutions that relied upon advice and made their own decision. So this histrionics is really dangerous. It led to the deaths of so many people that didn't take the COVID precautions, and now we're trying to relitigate those issues. And if you look at the scientific community in terms of actual research papers from those that study this stuff, the argument that was being made that, hey, this was a manufactured virus, the body of evidence indicates that it was natural because of the various strains of COVID that were released. So it's just really unfortunate that we still have this misinformation even today, Nathaniel.
Dr. Fauci is simply one of the leading infectious disease experts in the world. And the attack on him, and he valiantly and expertly helped to lead the federal government's COVID-19 response. In addition, colleagues, to the hollowing out of federal agencies like the Department of Health and Human Services, it is an outright assault on our American citizens and those programs that keep Americans healthy. And equally as concerning is the chilling effect on public health professionals, scientists, and the next generation of scientists and researchers. This is just a terrible situation, and just deplorable to watch that hearing this week.
What I thought was significant, I remember when the first vaccine came out, and it was only for first responders. And at the same time, we had experienced illness and death at my law firm. My investigator, he had contracted this deadly disease process and couldn't get rid of it. It just wouldn't leave. He couldn't breathe. It would attack your lungs, and you lost the ability to receive oxygen. And it was just a painful process to see how the disease process would invade your tissues and just wouldn't let go. And so I was grateful that we were able to take those shots. And in fact, I ended up taking 6 of those shots. And I'm a true believer that it protected me because there were so many people that I knew got sick and died. And so I'm just very thankful for the scientists that worked hard to develop the process that ended that. And a lot of people don't appreciate that human lives in America have been extended in this country because of one, access to better health, but more importantly, vaccinations. Because of that, we've been able to cure disease processes that has lengthened the human lives. And I think that when people revise history, they neglect something important. Modern medicine is there to save life and make our life safer. So this crazy stuff that they're doing in the Senate, it is so far off point. It's just disgusting, quite frankly. I don't know. I just think it's stupid.
I want to call out Kizzy Corbett, who is a leading American viral immunologist, and she's best known for her crucial role in developing the Moderna COVID-19 vaccine, African American female. And you're absolutely right, Nathaniel. When we were entering school as young children, there was no questions. You had to have certain vaccines in order to, register for school. I mean, it just wasn't a question. And hadn't we cured measles in the United States? And now it's outbreaking again across the nation.
Yeah. Hey, Pierre, you have a question? Go ahead. Pierre, you're on mute. Pierre, you're on mute. Okay, go ahead. Oh, okay, we lost him.
Well,
And
Attorney
go
Benita
ahead.
Benita makes a great point. Now the outgrowth of this hysteria that we see in the Fauci hearings, we see the same in the Department of Health and Human Services, vaccine deniers, and it's really particularly important, for not only for children, but some of these viruses that can be eradicated. Older people, it's particularly hazardous. Measles, mumps, rubella, I mean, all that sort of stuff is important. And when we have an administration that casts doubt on those vaccines, that can have very, very dangerous consequences. So I hope, your audience, Nathaniel, really pays a close attention and is very careful of the information that they're getting and making sure that it's accurate.
Attorney Banks, she said something that was profound, that the African Americans developed the Moderna, and we went with Moderna because I had a great deal of respect for her scientific. But what most people don't realize, these vaccines are not developed overnight. They're years in the making, and so they weren't developed because of what Trump did or said. Is that the vaccine process starts many years in advance. They have to do testing, and so it's sometimes a 3 to 10 year process. So it's not something that just occurs overnight because you have to test the product. And so I want to make that clear. So
we have a caller back, Pierre.
Pierre, okay, he's off mute. Go ahead, Pierre.
You got me?
Yes.
Okay. Real quickly, I just wanted Professor Primes to give, this is a great teaching moment. Explain to us out here what the Fifth Amendment actually is, and that versus the 14th Amendment. Can you explain to the audience the difference between, or the similarities between the Fifth and the 14th Amendment? And that's what I wanted to hear this morning.
The Fifth
Okay,
Amendment.
yeah, real briefly. Yeah, and then Milton, obviously, but Fifth Amendment, you have the right not to testify against yourself. So you can take the Fifth Amendment. Some countries, basically, if you're stopped, you don't have the right to remain silent. And the Fifth Amendment allows you to say, hey, I'm not going to participate. And I think, Fauci was right, because there's nothing he could have said that was going to satisfy the people in the audience. The 14th Amendment contains the equal protection clause that you need to be, treated equally as well. And that was part of the Civil War amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments.
Mm-hmm. Is there due
I
process
agree,
clause?
I agree with that, but sometimes the Fifth Amendment, when you assert the Fifth Amendment, people infer that you must be guilty. You're hiding something. You don't want the truth to be known. And it oftentimes deal with what little information you can give can be turned against you. And so why would you participate in supplying them anything that could be turned against you? So it's a case by case decision.
And with that type of hostile environment in terms of that hearing, some people were saying, well, why couldn't he answer what the color of his tie was or what the color of the floor was and those kind of things? But you have to be very, very, very careful with respect to your assertion of your Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, because if he had potentially answered those questions, then it could have been asserted that he waived that right and then opened the door to these other questions.
Let the
Am I
government.
still on?
Yes.
Address real quickly the due process parts of the 5th and the 14th. State versus federal. And I'll take it off the air.
Due process is that you're entitled to a hearing on whatever the allegation is against you by the government. You're entitled to a fair hearing. And as best I can say it. Marvin, you have something to add?
No, I think that covers it.
You have a
Right to be heard,
guarantee.
notice. You can't have a
Mhm.
deprivation of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So there should be a process in place, a hearing, knowing the charges that are against you, having an opportunity to respond, getting an attorney if you're, have the capacity to do so or have one appointed. Those are things that are important in terms of the due process clause.
Yeah. What's your point, Pierre? You asked 3 questions of Fifth Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the due process. What's your point, if I may ask a question?
Pierre is off the line. He can have to respond in the chat.
Okay.
We have a
Okay.
caller.
Yeah, go ahead, caller.
Hi, this is Renee from New York City. How you guys doing today?
Good morning, Renee.
Fantastic.
Good morning.
Good morning. Great. Can you hear me okay now? I want to make sure before I keep going.
Loud and
Absolutely.
clear, Renee.
I can hear
Thanks
you.
for calling.
Okay, great. Oh, thank you. So I think you guys have covered the whole Fauci thing, Dr. Fauci thing. I think people have a newfound respect for the Fifth Amendment now, because they understand, because everybody's been talking about it, attorneys been talking about it. So people get that he wasn't just pleading the Fifth for things that he was pardoned for. He was pleading the Fifth for things that they were going to ask him at that hearing. That, like, for instance, as Attorney Banks said, they asked him about the color of the folder. They said the red folder. Now, if he had agreed and they said, well, no, the folder isn't red, it's crimson, he would have been, and he could be brought up with charges for lying about the color of the folder. So, I mean, they were definitely trying to trap him, and I don't think they anticipated that he was going to plead the Fifth the whole time. And I don't understand why people are upset about him pleading the Fifth. I thought it was fantastic. I loved watching that. Because the person in the White House has pleaded the Fifth over 300 times and still got convicted of the crimes in New York. So, having said all that, but I'm also thinking about the Blanche hearing. So, the Stahl Commission vote. So I want to ask you a question, the attorney, so that I can understand. So he's going to be acting Attorney General for how long, even if he doesn't get out of the committee and confirmed? And then after that, how much, once his time is up, then there has to be another candidate put forward? And I'm going to mute myself on that. Thank you.
Go ahead. I don't know the answer to that. Milton, Marlon, I don't know.
But there
people,
is an appointment
people don't.
act, and you can be in a temporary position for a certain period of time. So
Right.
Judiciary Act, and and I think we talked about this in prior shows
Hmm.
as relates to U.S. attorneys that had been appointed, and
Right.
there's a process for the U.S. attorney that if they're not confirmed, then the judges can get together and make an appointment. And we saw that, I believe it was in New Jersey, where by or one of the other jurisdictions, whereby the judges got together and made it an appointment. And the whole idea is that the president nominates, but it's the Senate function to confirm. And if we allowed someone just to put someone in an acting role indefinitely, it would kind of usurp the authority of the Senate. So there is a limitation on it. So if they're, so I think what they're talking about is withdrawing the nomination and maybe perhaps putting him in some other role, and waiting until the election, the midterms, to see if they can get two senators. Right now, there's two senators, Cornyn out of Texas, and then there's a senator out of North Carolina that are raising some very legitimate questions. And without their vote, they're not going to be able to confirm him. And the concerns are legitimate. Let's think about this, and I think there should be more public attention. The deal that was brokered, there was a conflict of interest. The president basically filed suit because someone had released his taxes. And so, then he had the Department of Justice, which he also controls, litigate the case and decide to settle it. And the resolution was that there was going to be a $1.8 billion fund available. And the question presented was that these senators asked, well, hey, let me know if that, part of the settlement is no longer in place, put it in writing, and the department hasn't done so. And then other question presented was it allowed the president, his family, his businesses to be exempt from any prior IRS audits or any prior activity. And the question was, hey, is that just for things in the past, or does that go on infinitum? Which is a legitimate question. So I'm just really surprised that we haven't gotten more national attention just to this egregious settlement where people attacked our Capitol, were beating police officers, and there was actually a settlement that they could access funds. They were basically pardoned by the president, and now they could access funds for engaging in criminality. So I think there are really legitimate concerns in terms of holding up the nomination.
May I say
We have
this?
a call. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. It bothered me when I was doing trial work for 51 years for my client not to testify. Because I know if I'm a juror sitting there, I want to hear your story. And this Fifth Amendment and all, I respect your right to assert that. And so I probably, Marlon, put my client to your satisfaction on the stand more than most defense lawyers. But that was after a lot of preparation and a lot of
Right.
preparation and a lot of readiness to admit what mistakes you may have made. Maybe not for the ultimate charge, but in life. So it's a matter of preparation. Transparency, I think, comes with the office of public. When you're in an office and you're responsible to the public, I think there's a certain amount of you have to be transparent. The public wants to know. The public is entitled to know certain questions. So now, do you give that person immunity, blanket immunity against any and everything they may say, including a murder that nobody knows anything about, if they set up on this stand and they answer to the public? I don't know the answer to that, but asserting the fifth doesn't necessarily make the public comfortable. And I think that when you take a public office and you represent the public and you are involved, Vanita, with the public, you agree to a certain amount of transparency that taking the fifth does not give. And so somewhere in between there, we got to reach an understanding and an agreement. That's how I feel about it.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Milton. You're addressing the subtleties and the nuance and the balancing that comes into play in determining whether or not to put your client on the stand for all of the reasons that you so expertly stated. With respect to the Todd Blanche confirmation hearing, the president is threatening to withdraw his nomination, keep him in an acting role as Attorney General, and push for this, what he's calling anti-weaponization fund. We know it's a weaponization fund as a result of senators and representatives and Republicans, Cornyn and Tillis, demanding that written confirmation, as did the federal judge in his lengthy opinion, that that weaponization fund is dead.
We
The
have a
vote was
caller.
postponed last Thursday. It's scheduled for next Tuesday, prior to the Senate going into recess next week. So we'll see what happens.
Okay, Guy, you have a question or comment for us today?
Yes, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to caution and warn, I guess, this is August the 1st, and November election is coming up, the most important election in terms of the country, I believe, in terms of the direction it's going to go under this outlaw administration. The outlaw administration is wreaking havoc, causing confusion. We have Ebola outbreak, which supposedly they have no cure for. We have other diseases. Nobody knows what's causing them. We have various dangerous things on the horizon. We have a possible renewal of the military draft because our so-called leaders have stepped into it with Iran and have created a situation where it's probably going to take a ground troops war to accomplish what they want to accomplish, which means a draft will be renewed. We have these dangerous things, and I think that we need to be cognizant about the fact that we have roughly 90 days to get ready for this election. Also, the president keeps talking about the so-called Save America Act. We need to know exactly what's in the Save America Act because they're gaslighting the fact that it's just about making sure that the proper voters have the proper credentials to vote. So this is going to be doubled down on, I believe, and we need to worry now about who's going to be eligible to vote in this country. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, thank you very much.
Excellent point, Sky, as usual.
What we, the point of this is that I think we got 93 days to the election. The election is November the 3rd, 2026. And so ordinarily that would be 93 days, but we have 2 months with 31 days. So it's about 94, 95 days away. And the point of that is that if you're listening to this show today, check your voter registration. If you have elderly folks that are in nursing homes, what I want you to do is fill out the form and let them vote by mail. So if you have a relative or a friend that's in a nursing home, have them vote by mail. The second thing is that if you've been convicted of a crime, once you're out of jail, your right to vote is generally restored in most states. Like in Indiana, so long as you're not in the state prison, you're eligible to vote for the most part. So make sure that you participate, because one of the problems that I've run into is that so many folks, they'll get a misdemeanor and say, Attorney Lee, I can't vote. What the hell you mean you can't vote? You got a misdemeanor. You're not in prison. And so our state basically say if you're in prison, you can't vote. But if you're not, you can for the most part. So just keep that in mind. The third thing is that your relatives and your friends, make sure that you talk to the people that are in your orbit, your friends, your relative, your spouse, and make sure that they're registered. Check your voter registration. You could check it on the internet, but make sure that you're properly registered. So this is a process that we're all in this together, and there are so many things that are adversely affecting us. And the key thing, though, is that we've seen a rapid decline in our rights in this country. We see this ICE patrol run amok. They've gone way beyond the scope of what's legal and illegal, in my opinion. And so, in order to restore justice and accountability, we have to make a strong showing and win back the House and the Senate in the midterms. Now, the other issue was the Todd Blanche nomination, which I'm still not sure of. The slush fund that they created and the waiver of the rights of the IRS to examine tax return, that to me was just bizarre. In other words, as part of that settlement agreement, I thought that some federal judge, Marlin, said it was bogus. Did they throw out that agreement and say it was bogus or fraudulent?
They did, and they said that they could not refer to it. In fact, and what makes the nomination so outlandish is that the federal judge sent her opinion to the Bar Association where Todd Blanche is licensed in New York, and it's very rare that a federal judge does that. Any other situation, your audience should know that if you are up for a nomination and it's before the Senate and that type of evidence is uncovered, your nomination is always going to be withdrawn. So this is withdrawn. So this is very unusual that you have a nominee with this type of baggage, and he's basically saying, "Well, hey, there's nothing to see here," but it's very problematic in my view.
Not to mention his handling of the Epstein files or the Epstein case. And I agree. Go ahead.
Hey, Vanita, here's what I don't understand. What the Sean Diddy Combs in prison, the other singers in prison, and it was a lot less allegation of misconduct for those two individuals got lengthy prison sentences. Does that highlight the disparity in the American justice system? Because the Epstein persons, I've not seen any of those folks prosecuted yet.
That's absolutely correct, Nathaniel. We're also looking at 34 felony convictions of this particular president as well. And so, yes, the disparity is glaring from my perspective. What do you think, Milton?
Well, I think it's a fair and equal justice system. It must be because it protects the wealthy.
On that insane comment, we ought to check his pulse because I think he just had a stroke or something.
All roads lead to the midterms. Our singular focus is to educate, mobilize, but more and equally as importantly, to turn out the vote on election day. And during the National Bar Association convention last week, the National Bar Association incoming president, James Carter, and Damon, what's Damon's last name? Hewitt, with the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights, and CEO and President Mark Marial of the Urban League, they penned a landmark agreement that is singularly focused on ensuring that our communities will be able to exercise their fundamental right to vote on election day.
Good.
One final comment, Marlon, for the folks in Ohio. You got some critical elections there.
We really do. For the Senate, that could really indicate whether or not Senate stays in its current hands or it's changes hands. So it's important everyone gets out and votes all over the country, particularly Ohio.
Well, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Join us next week as we deal with legal issues of the day. So thank you, audience, and thank you for calls in. It's been very informative today. So thank everybody. Thank you.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Good evening.